Hello, one, hello, all, and welcome to the newest podcast in town, Figure Foucast. My name's Sam Gardner. I'm joined by my good friend, Damien. How are you doing, Damien?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you, man. Right, so let's get to it. The Figure Forecast is a wrestling podcast. We're going to be doing this probably once every couple of weeks, see how it goes. But this first episode is going to be focusing on the preview to the Royal Rumble, what we think might happen, our best moments from the Royal Rumble, and basically just have a good talk about it. We're not experts, we're just two normal blokes talking about wrestling. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, before we jump into the Royal Rumble, I think for any of our listeners who aren't caught up, we should probably talk about this week in wrestling and what's been happening recently. If we start with Monday Night Raw, I'm sure you're going to love talking about this. It's been an interesting few weeks with Raw. The main story is obviously the Randy Orton and The Fiend kind of thread that's been going on for a few weeks now. Randy Orton obviously debuting a new look.
Yeah, it seems like Randy Orton is trying to be a luchador with a Dorito nose.
Yeah.
Similar to Juan Cena.
A throwback there. Obviously, for anyone who hasn't been watching Raw, recently Randy Orton had his face burnt, and this week turned up with what looked to be another wrestling mask turned inside out and a very red nose.
A very, very red nose. Can I just say one thing about that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on burns. I'm not going to pretend to be one. However, at the beginning of his promo, he said he's got first-degree burns, and I'm pretty sure that the worst thing you can do with burns is wrap them up in a mask, especially if they're first degree. Now, I don't want to say that's 100% gospel, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the difference between first, second, third degree. I feel they get worse as the number goes up, but I do recall like not wrapping something up is probably a good idea for a burn. But this is the world of wrestling. Being scientifically accurate is not always their first priority.
I mean, true. I mean, I just remember watching it on Tuesday morning here in the UK, and me wanting to fast forward that segment, but my mouth just hitting the floor seeing Randy Orton in what they've dressed him in.
So I enjoyed it. I've been enjoying the whole story. I think it's probably the best thing that's happening on Raw. I know you'll say that's not exactly difficult because there's a lot of lower quality things happening at Raw at the minute. But I'm enjoying the story. I'm interested to see where it goes. And although I feel like the mask is a odd choice, I feel it opens up a few interesting story beats they could tell. We'll have to tune in on it'll be Tuesday for us in the UK, but tune in next week to Raw to watch and see what happens. And I believe Randy Orton has declared himself for the Royal Rumble. So
he not only declared himself, he said that he was going to win the Royal Rumble. And I hate to break this to you, Damien, but if he wins the Royal Rumble, this might be the shortest lived podcast ever, because I'm not watching wrestling ever again.
Well, you heard it here, first, folks. If Randy Orton wins, or if you're listening to it and he has won, there will be no second episode, unfortunately. So that's
a new podcast about knitting or something.
I don't know what we'd call it, but we'll think of another name. What else happened? What else big has been happening on Raw?
What else good has been happening on Raw? Not a lot, to be honest.
Ooh, that's a bit harsh. There's been some other good moments on Raw. I know you're not a fan at the moment, but I'm still enjoying it. It's not the highlight of my Tuesday, but it's definitely something I look forward to seeing what is going on, good or bad.
I mean, if it's not the highlight of your Tuesday in lockdown, I'd love to know what is.
It's obviously my dinner. I'm a big lover of my dinner on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, I know. I might sound a bit harsh on Raw at the minute. I know they've been hit with the old COVID outbreak there, and people having to pull double duty. But it has been particularly poor, I think, for the last few weeks for me, anyway. One thing I did enjoy more out of morbid fascination more than actually enjoy. I think was seeing Gilbert on Raw a couple of months after a heart attack as well.
I didn't
And
know. I
I was
didn't know
like,
about the heart attack.
yeah, I'm sure I read a couple of months ago he had a heart attack. I was like, bloody hell, he's either tight for money and has to do this in the middle of COVID, or that guy's one tough motherfucker.
I mean, he's not actually having to wrestle, which probably makes coming back a little bit easier on him.
True.
But that was an interesting segment. I feel only came about because, unfortunately, Drew McIntyre has tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, definitely.
He said he's not showing any symptoms and he's feeling okay. Whether that's just because it's something he's saying.
And he is booked for the upcoming Raw as well. So
yeah,
fingers crossed he's all good.
Whether that's just something that he's been saying because he's on TV and he doesn't want to be, or if he actually is. I feel that has changed the story with him and Goldberg, which is not a story I'm enthusiastic about. I feel that.
So I was going to ask your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on Goldberg returning, and where do you see it going?
I don't have a problem with the returning legend storyline, as long as it's played well. I don't want to see Goldberg win the WWE title. I really hope he doesn't. I mean, you mentioned if Randy Orton wins the Royal Rumble that this will be the last episode of the podcast. I believe I did mention something similar before about if Goldberg wins the WWE title that I would stop watching. But I feel like it may just be I stopped watching Raw because there is other good stuff happening in the world of wrestling.
There is.
So,
I mean, my take on Goldberg is such of impending doom. I fear that it's not a case of if he's going to win the title or if he's going to be at WrestleMania. He is going to be at WrestleMania in some sense, and I think I'll expand on that a bit later when we're talking about the Rumble itself. But I can't see any good coming from Goldberg being here at all. I know. I mean, some people there might be someone in a corner of the world that loves Goldberg still, but that's not me.
Outside of his match with Undertaker a few years, I can't remember when that was ago.
Since
the Saudi Arabia match with the Undertaker, where they both had a few mistakes, I will say.
That's very kind.
His returns have been okay. I
like the one at SummerSlam where he just randomly returned and kicked Dolph Ziggler's ass.
That was cool. That was very entertaining. His matches with Brock Lesnar were entertaining at the time. His match with The Fiend was a bit frustrating, again, because he won the title, which I don't have a problem with Goldberg being back. It's just more that he's in the title picture. But then again, I'm not sure where else he could pop up. I
just don't think he's needed.
He probably should have challenged Randy Orton. As that felt like that's what they were setting it up for, and then he challenged Drew McIntyre.
Just going back a couple of weeks as well, when he did come back, the logic that Goldberg said was that McIntyre was disrespecting the legends. But if you rewind like an hour or so before that in Raw, McIntyre was there posing with flipping Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart and saying what they meant to him. There wasn't an ounce of disrespect to the legends. So I see what you mean with Randy Orton, and potentially that would have been a better story.
Probably would have, but I'm guessing they're just not done with the Fiend storyline there.
Yeah, that's true. I really liked the Sheamus story that was developing with McIntyre, and that might be a longer burner, but I thought it was ideal for the Rumble, to be honest.
The friends turned enemies turned friends, kind of back and forth.
Yeah, the whole thing with Keith Lee, I thought it was good, and I thought Royal Rumble, the title's never really going to change hands. I know we just said maybe it will with Goldberg, but it's never one that you really think that the main title is going to change hands.
No, I'm not sure
So
how many times it has changed hands at the Royal Rumble. I feel like you never think it will, but it might surprise us and actually have changed hands quite a few times. But it never seems likely because of the way the Royal Rumble is booked to face a champion at WrestleMania. You kind of feel like it's set up with whoever the champion is on the night. But if the Royal Rumble goes last after the men's championship, well, because they've got two now, only one of them can go on last. And I feel like if you had back-to-back Royal Rumbles, that would be a little bit too much in one go.
Yeah.
So if Goldberg, God forbid, does beat Drew McIntyre, then that does then impact the Royal Rumble on who might win, and you can build that story. So I feel like realistically, the Royal Rumble is the last good time to change the champion. There is one or sometimes two pay-per-views between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, and it's normally quite unlikely that the title changes hands there, unless, of course, it is directly part of the story. I believe there has been a few times I can think of where the title has changed hands afterwards, but it's normally part of a larger story. So,
one more thing that I want to talk about on Raw is the whole Charlotte, Lacey Evans, and Ric Flair storyline.
Okay.
First of all, I want to know what you think about it before I weigh in.
I think it has potential. It's a little weird, but I think it could be funny. I think they could play it well. I've not seen so much of that so far, but it's early days on a story. So either it's going to be great, or they're going to just stop having Ric Flair on the show and never mention it again. It is WWE after all.
Yeah, I mean, there are aspects that I like about it. But I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago when it first started, the whole Charlotte, get out of my business thing to Ric Flair. It's been done a few times and it's a bit boring, but it's developed from there a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've always liked Lacey Evans in a way. She seems, there's a character in there and a performer in there that I like. The only thing that gets me about it is I always feel uneasy, especially only at the minute with COVID, about Ric Flair being there, especially just after a COVID outbreak as well. I just can't just sit back, relax, and enjoy what's happening. It's always on the back of my mind. But look, maybe that's a different issue.
That is not something I'd considered when watching it. To be fair, I always feel just kind of when watching the wrestling that they must be taking some precautions. But yeah, I suppose that could be something that
maybe that's just my worrying mind taking over.
Could be, but is there any other highlights or lowlights that you've had of Raw in the recent weeks that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I just want to go back to the main event of Raw this week, and Alexa's Playground. Actually, Alexa's Playground. I thought that was possibly up there with Bayley, This Is Your Life, with one of the worst segments that I've seen in recent times. It was so bad. I think WWE have clearly sort of lost interest in Asuka in a way during the empty performance.
Are you
center
referring to the match or the talk show segment earlier in the night?
Well, I'll go for the talk show first.
Okay.
I've seen online that a lot of people have said Alexa Bliss is really, 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 really good at acting, but I thought it was really bad. I thought it was really bad acting, and I thought the way that they portrayed Asuka as scared was really weak. That's not what I had in my mind of what Asuka was. I sort of had her in my mind as the dominating champion.
Yeah, she did used to
a little girl speaking.
Sorry, continue.
I was going to say a little girl, if you want, in Alexa Bliss speaking to her imaginary friend, making her piss her pants pretty much, sort of undermined any sort of credibility that Asuka had. I think it's pretty clear they're going to take the title off her soon. But who to? Maybe we'll find out.
The only
soon.
thing I would say about that is if you imagine in the world of WWE, whether they try and play it off as being a TV show or real life, it's kind of its own thing. That you've got to imagine, from Asuka's point of view, that Alexa Bliss isn't pretending to talk to an imaginary friend. She's actually doing that.
Yeah.
She actually has an imaginary friend who has magical powers, which would be quite an intimidating thing.
True.
So when we watch it and we see it's wrestlers pretending to have split personalities, and like Bray Wyatt pretends to be the Fiend, and Alexa, I don't think she's been given an extra name, but she has this kind of dark persona as seen in the main event. We watch it and think, oh, they're pretending, but if you watch it as a TV show, then that would be quite a dramatic, like, oh, this person can teleport and set things on fire just willingly. It would be quite intimidating and a worrying thing to do. I feel that's something that's kind of been lost in WWE recently, is where they kind of try and blur the lines between reality and TV show. And I don't think they've helped themselves with that, because they always try and push it off as this is real. And then when they do that little extra things, maybe it's just not quite hitting the mark with certain fans. But with everything that's happening in WWE and with everything that's happening in wrestling, I don't feel like you're meant to enjoy everything.
No, I think they're trying to cater to everyone.
Like if you go into any post on social media from a wrestling company, whether it be WWE, AEW, Impact, any company that posts something, there will be people that say this is the best thing ever, and then there'll also be people that say it's the worst thing ever. WWE tweeted something the other day about The Fiend, and some of the comments were like, oh, he's the worst thing ever, I don't want to ever see him on TV again. When for the best part of a year, he's been one of the highlights. Whether he may not have been booked the best at all times, but he's always been one of the things you look forward to seeing, or what they're going to do with him. But there are some people who are just going to hate him. Yeah. So I feel like you're not meant to enjoy everything.
I get that. I like The Fiend as a whole. I've enjoyed him. There's obviously been some ropey moments, but when isn't there? Pretty much. It's just this segment, maybe less so Alexa Bliss, more. I don't understand why they put Asuka in there. It could have been anyone, but I just feel like it sort of damaged Asuka more than Alexa Bliss in a way.
Hopefully it's not a permanent damage. I'm sure they can work it back in to her looking pretty dominant. Does she have a title match as of now at Royal Rumble?
Well, not at the minute. No, not at the minute. But Alexa said she's in the Rumble.
Yeah.
So I guess they're going to announce something on Monday, maybe this coming Monday. But if we want to go to the match, I actually quite enjoyed the match itself. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought I liked the idea of what they did with Alexa snapping and turning into like a possessed fiend kind of person, if you will. I thought, how do I put it? The way they did it with the advert break, I thought sucked a little bit. I thought they could have potentially just edited it, because
it did seem a little odd. I didn't realize at first either that she'd changed her t-shirt. So when it came back, and I was like, oh, I expected some like dramatic change, but the only thing I noticed that she'd changed her hairstyle, and I thought, oh, that was a little odd. But it was and
then just put
makeup and hairstyle, and it wasn't until the end when obviously they did the flick back to regular Alexa Bliss, I noticed the t-shirt change.
They could have just done it in like a Undertaker lights off style thing where he just appears. They could have easily edited it out. There's no like live crowd there, and you could have just fed what the Thunderdome audience, the feed that's coming through the TV anyway. Could have just filmed it earlier and put it all together.
I think I'm not entirely sure. Maybe there is someone that's already spoken about this, but I think during the ad break they filmed the end segment of Raw when she's back as regular Alexa Bliss. I think that's why they did the ad break, because they obviously had to film that and it had the Thunderdome in the background. So I feel like that's why they did the ad break, because they were trying to film it. But they have been doing a lot of this kind of the Thunderdome screens go off and then they can change things on. So they've done it with Triple H. Was it last week or the week before, disappearing before the Fireball with Randy Orton? That they did that, and they've been doing that a lot. And I feel that's really adding something to these stories, and that they can do this little kind of change. They can make things work that wouldn't. And it's definitely something that's been good with the Thunderdome era of WWE, and that they've had this ability to be able to kind of do this more ridiculous stuff with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about Raw, or are we about there?
There is a lot of other stuff that's happened on Raw, but I feel like we've been talking quite a while about a few of these topics, and we've got a couple of other shows to cover before we even get to our big topic. So if we move on to SmackDown.
Fresh in our minds as we both watched it this morning at the time of recording.
It's only just finished for me. I think I stopped watching the last segment about an hour before we started recording today. So hopefully I can remember everything.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good show in total. I quite enjoyed it.
I was quite entertained today. I was focused a little bit more on trying to remember on what was happening, knowing we was going to do this podcast, but didn't take any of the fun out of it for me.
Right. I want to ask you one question. Okay. When I say your highlight, has been your highlight of SmackDown over the last few weeks? What's the immediate thing that comes to your mind?
So the highlight for me has been Roman Reigns.
Roman Reigns. Okay. Yeah, I'd probably agree, but pushing him, I'd say, is Billie Kay. I just find it so funny.
Yeah, she has been quite entertaining. And this week, Bianca Belair and she did another impression. I can't think who it is now.
Oh, she did.
Bianca Belair and Carmella impressions backstage were a nice, very small, but humorous moment that I did have a little chuckle at. I think it was last week during the entrance when she was really trying to be like Punk, not CM Punk. I want to clarify. When you're talking about wrestling, you've got to be careful there. Really trying to be like a punk rocker as she was walking to the ring was quite a funny moment. And she has been quite interesting.
And there's a bit in their entrance last week. I think Ruby maybe helps Liv up onto the ring, and then Billy was just waiting there with her arm out, like, "Come on, man, help me as well. I want to be part of the squad." It's just, it's funny. And when the Iconics broke up last year, who would have put their money on Billie Kay being probably the best one out?
This is definitely the most entertaining. I'm not sure why. It felt like Peyton Royce at the time was going to be the star, but it just doesn't seem to have happened.
I think she's the better wrestler. Yeah, they've just put in that random tag team with Lacey,
which now seems to not be happening because of Lacey and the Ric Flair story. So,
yeah, who knows? Another highlight for me on SmackDown. Sami
Zayn has been it's been a bit up and down for me over the last few months on my enjoyment of the Sami Zayn segment. I thought this week was a good one. I tend to not be a fan of the cowardly heel characters, and that's definitely been the character that Sami Zayn has been portraying. But him handcuffing himself to the barricade and just being like a presence for a few matches and so just being there was quite funny. And then he got to be dominant in the ring, which is something we haven't seen from Sami Zayn in a while. So hopefully this story can do good things for him.
Well, I'm guessing that it's leading to a triple threat at Rumble between Apollo Crews, Big E, and Sammy the Intercontinental Championship. I think that's the logical way
I
that it's
would
going.
be surprised if it wasn't. The only thing I could think of is maybe they would save it, but I don't know if they would save it for WrestleMania, or if it will just end up with maybe a rematch at WrestleMania. So it probably is a good chance it's going to happen, the Royal Rumble.
I mean, knowing WWE and their track record of managing to keep a enthralling story from January all the way through to April to Mania, I think that's quite.
They're normally
unlikely.
good at the WrestleMania stories. They normally set things up just before the Royal Rumble, and then they kind of continue that thread until WrestleMania. Because of course, the Royal Rumble is the first stop on the road to WrestleMania.
Yeah, as Michael Cole said many times on last night on SmackDown. Just making sure we know that we haven't been watching it for like 20 years or whatever. Just making sure.
Got to get those sound bites in there somewhere.
Exactly. I don't think it is going to go to the Rumble because I have a feeling. Well, I hope that Big E is the one to win the Rumble, but we'll come to that in a bit anyway.
Come back to
maybe spoiler.
So obviously the big topic on SmackDown has been the tribal chief, the head of the table, the big dog, the man of many nicknames, Roman Reigns. He's almost on par with Daenerys Targaryen for the longest name in entertainment at the moment.
He is, and I think he's earned all of them. I think he's probably the best thing in wrestling.
This heel character. People have been saying it for years that he needed to be heel, and I never imagined this would be the sort of heel he was going to portray.
Me either, but he absolutely. Yeah, exactly, man. He's badass, isn't
he? He's intimidating as a wrestler on TV can be, and you believe that people would be like scared of him. So obviously, not everyone. Like you can't have everyone be scared of him because otherwise you've not got anyone to feud with him. But you do kind of get that kind of impression that he, like the fact he's saying that he gets to make the rules and stuff, and it's like, well, yeah, how he's been portrayed, I can believe that. There we go. I'm sounding like Roman Reigns now.
Believe that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the final thing they need to do, and I was reading earlier this week that they're working on new music for him, is change that entrance music, and it'll get him away from the Shield ties. But I think this character just suits him to a T. He's absolutely owning it. That opening promo as well that he did today. Usually, I'm not a fan, and I sort of switch off for opening promos to a show because WWE does so much. But I was listening to all of it, and it's convincing. He's not playing a wrestler. Yeah. That's him, isn't it? It's like literally coming from him.
Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely been a highlight each week. Ever since it started with, and I'm gonna have to get the right one. Is it Jey Uso? He was feuding with?
Main event Uso. You could have got out of it. Main event.
I wish I had. If by some weird slim chance Jey Uso is listening to this, I am very sorry that I forgot. I know he brought it up in one of his promos when he was feuding with Roman Reigns that people always ask which one is he. You always struggle with twins, and especially when they're playing the same character type, and they always have been. It can
and they wear the exact same clothes.
It can be a little bit difficult to tell them apart, and I would have to apologise to both of them if I ever had the luck to meet them. In that, it is so difficult to tell them apart. In how
sorry, Jay. Sorry.
Especially how WWE booked them as well. But they've always been a tag team. But even so, as I was saying, with him main eventing against Roman Reigns, those matches were probably some of the best matches we've had this year. But say this year in wrestling, not this year, it was in 2021 because that was last year. But there was some of the highlights, and you wouldn't have got that. Although we've had highlights with the Usos. They had a match, Hell in a Cell match against the New Day a few years ago, which was probably the match of the night.
Awesome.
I think it was at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. Probably was the match of the nights at the time. They're amazingly talented, but they just you never see them as being in the main event, just how the stories were told. But this Roman Reigns story has given us that. It will be interesting to see where that story goes when Jimmy returns.
It will. I think one thing that's 100% sure that I'm sure we'll both agree on is that Roman is holding that title until Mania, at least.
I would be incredibly surprised if he didn't.
Yeah, incredibly surprised and very annoyed if he didn't. If he didn't go into Mania with the title, then I'd be very annoyed.
One thing on SmackDown I was a tiny bit disappointed with was that Paul Heyman came out in a suit for his match. I know they were going to... They did the swapping the person that was in the match trick that to get Adam Pearce and Roman Reigns into a fight, but I really just wish that Paul Heyman had come out in some kind of ring gear.
Yeah, I see that. It would have been more convincing, I suppose, in a way. It was kind of a bit obvious to know what was happening.
I didn't think that was going to happen until he came out. I thought there was going to be some twist, but I didn't think it was going to be that. Yeah, I didn't think that it was going to be Roman Reigns was just going to swap. I mean, maybe it should have been obvious.
Even if he came down in vest and his suit trousers, that would have been a bit better.
Hopefully we get some. I say hopefully. Hopefully at some point maybe Paul Heyman does get a bit of comeuppance, because there's been some amazing moments over the years with Paul Heyman when someone's finally got a hold of him, and he's a
yeah.
He plays that kind of that weaselly character that you just love to hate so well. He's got such a way with words normally, whoever he's representing. But I would have liked to have seen Adam Pearce get his hands on Paul Heyman, even if scrap daddy, even if just for a moment before Roman Reigns came in.
Maybe in the future weeks, but I understand what you're saying. One thing I do want to add that I tweeted out last night, to your surprise, Roman Reigns is the main event picture being so good, I feel has elevated SmackDown, the whole show, and made it seem so much better. It just feels refreshing in a way, and I think that's kind of how what's suffering on Raw. I'm not saying that the on Raw is amazing, but it's very average. But I don't think the main event on Raw is as captivating as on SmackDown. And Reigns just feels like a star. He feels like the only true star in WWE at the minute.
I can see that.
To me, I mean, Drew's pushing him, but I wouldn't say that he's sort of star level. I think he's just very, very, very good, and I like Drew McIntyre. But Reigns is just head and shoulders above everyone else, and I feel like that benefits the entire show.
Even the little things, like they recently released the WrestleMania announcement for the next 3 years, with having WWE superstars portraying other characters for comedic effect. Even just in that moment of Roman deciding, no, I'm not going to do that. Was just they've been very good with his character, and it is making him feel quite big, which is something WWE have been trying to do with Roman Reigns for years. And this time, I don't know if everyone haven't really been looking at how people online are reacting to Roman Reigns. I generally try to avoid it because I've always been a fan of Roman, and a lot of people don't seem to like him online. Right. But I
think a lot of the criticism before was unfair. I think he's always good. I guess it's just the character, isn't it? You've seen this new has just unlocked something else.
Another surprising highlight for me on SmackDown this week was the Salt Course segment between Bianca Belair and Bayley. Normally, these kind of segments are terrible.
Oh man, I'm completely different to you. I love these sort of segments. Like instantly, when you say a Salt Course segment, I think back to a couple of years ago. It was an awful story between Sami Zayn and Bobby Lashley about his three sisters. But there was an assault course segment in that was amazing, and it's similar to Reigns to a lesser extent. Anything that Bayley's involved in at the minute, I just feel is gold, and I knew it was going to be good. That should make it good.
Normally, I don't like these segments because they're always between a face and a heel, but it's normally a case of why aren't they just having a match? If it was two faces doing it, it would make sense. They don't want to fight each other. They want to prove who's best. And Assault Course, it always tends to be two people who don't like each other. And it's like, why are they not just having a match or something? But the way that Bayley and Bianca Belair have been feuding has been almost as if it's two faces.
Yeah, no, Bayley's not been the out-and-out heel. She's shown
she's definitely the heel in the story, but she's not like being like she's not being violent just for no reason. It's normally it does kind of make sense of just like you've got to have a bad guy in the story, but it's Bayley for this one. Could easily swap roles in most of the segments and not really change much. But I really enjoyed this one. The inclusion of Chad Gable and Otis made me laugh because Otis is just always funny. His mannerisms are always a highlight.
And Chad Gable's
so glad
just
he
awesome
stopped
as
being
well.
Shorty
I love
G.
Chad Gable. Oh my god, me too. So just the worst.
That was a highlight. And just a little cheating that Bayley did of like skipping the walls and changing things up for Bianca was just quite funny. They're both in the Royal Rumble, I believe, so I'm assuming they're going to have some kind of confrontation in.
Yeah, I don't know if they're actually going to have an out-and-out match at the Rumble,
yeah,
but you could see them having a moment
in the Rumble
in the Rumble, maybe where with Bianca maybe eliminating her or vice
versa. That was an unexpected highlight for me. I wasn't expecting much from it, but I did quite enjoy that moment.
Yeah, I mean Bianca Belair, Fireman carrying Otis. That's impressive, man.
Yeah,
that is impressive. I know she's a athlete, but that dude's heavy. He's like 350 pounds. I'm not sure what that is in stone, but I'm pretty sure it's over 20 stone.
300 pounds would be, so it's got to be somewhere around 140 kilograms, which is
it's got to be pushing 25 stone.
It's not quite double what I weigh. I don't know. There's the wrong way around. I'm a bit heavier than half of an Otis. So,
you're like an Otis leg.
So he's a big dude.
Otis is a big dude, and for her to carry it with ease,
and
it was
Bayley
impressive.
struggling to carry Chad Gable, which was obviously for show, but it did just make that seem way more impressive, even if for a second.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it was intended, but her missing the first shot for the basketball as well. That
little things like that just made
little things like that. I think Bayley's like an expert.
The only other moment that's kind of standing out to me from SmackDown this week, maybe there's some others that you could talk about, could think about and talk about, but the other one was the Sasha Banks versus Reginald match.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got it written down here as one of my bullet points from the show. Reginald may become my new favorite wrestler. Yeah, I mean, I think that dude's made out of rubber or something. He just flips all over the place. I've not heard of him before, but I read about him a little bit this morning.
I assume he would be,
which makes sense. But yeah, exactly. but it was just completely unexpected that he would just bounce all over the place like that. It was like
Yeah.
when you just throw a rubber
So
ball or something,
there
and
are
he just
lots
spins
of
all over the shop.
wrestlers in WWE and other promotions who can do the kind of more athletic things. You've got people like in WWE, like Ricochet, for example, who can do all that kind of stuff. But even them
Yeah,
have never been given kind of just that, like, just go out there and be athletic. Like, whatever you do, like, you just do it. And it just seemed way more impressive, and it was very fun to watch.
I think because he was unsure
Yeah.
what to expect. But yeah, I really enjoyed the match actually. And I wanted to ask your view on the women's title picture as a whole with Carmella and Sasha. It just it almost feels a bit stale to me at the minute. I like both women. I really, really like Sasha. I've always liked Carmella, even when she was with Ellsworth back in the day. But I can't sort of see a clear route of where the women's title picture is going at the minute.
No, I've been thinking about it for the predicting the Royal Rumble, which we'll get to in a little while, and trying to think
Yeah,
about what the main event of WrestleMania would be for a Royal Rumble
yeah,
is a bit of a challenge this year. Some of them seem a bit more obvious, but for me at least, I am struggling on the
yeah.
women's title pictures just to kind of figure out where they're going. As we said when we were talking about Raw, there's no Raw title match as of yet at the Royal Rumble,
No,
and I don't think they've announced Sasha versus Carmella for the Royal Rumble, but I would imagine that will be a match that we see.
yeah, yeah. It just seems like a shame to me because throughout pretty much the entire of last year, I thought that the SmackDown Women's title with Bailey having it was one of the highlights of all of WWE with the Sasha feuds and everything else that went on. I really, really enjoyed it. And now
I
it just
don't think
seems to
it's
have almost
bad.
dropped off a
I
cliff.
think it's more
And
just
I
other
really,
things are better at the minute. Um, like the Sasha and
yeah,
Carmella story has been entertaining, um, but it does have a feel of where does it go from here.
it just seems to
But
be wheel
there
spinning,
is normally that bit
if you
of
know what I mean.
a lull before the Royal Rumble of where stories, if they're not going to be going on to WrestleMania, do just kind of
Yeah,
the wheels just turn a little bit. So hopefully we see something at the Royal Rumble or in the weeks following where we start building something good. I have some theories. We'll get to those in a little while, but it's not a
yeah,
it's not a
yeah.
negative for SmackDown. It's still a good part of the show. Um, it's just it's kind of
Yeah, it's
it's a bit
still
more
good. It's
neutral,
not
it's a
like
bit
it's
more
absolutely
middle because
dying.
everything else is so entertaining. It is kind of just lacking something a little bit, and that's nothing against any of the
Yeah.
people involved. They're all immensely talented. Um, it's just you can't kind of quite draw the attention when you've got such other big entertaining things on a show.
Okay, okay. The last thing I want to say is last week Cesaro beat Daniel Bryan clean, and this week I can't even think who he beat now. Who did he beat? Who did Cesaro beat?
Dolph
Why has my
Ziggler.
mind gone completely blank? It was Dolph Ziggler, former world champion. Two former world champions in 2 weeks. A late push. This is roughly around the time that Drew was pushed last year. Could they be potentially thinking about Cesaro finally winning the Royal Rumble and going into the title picture and shutting up all of the internet nerds going, what about Cesaro online? Could they or couldn't they?
I think we just need to talk
What
about
do
it
you
a little
think?
bit more
Is he
when
a
we
dog?
get to the Royal Rumble itself. But I do have a theory
Yeah.
with Cesaro, and unfortunately, it doesn't involve him going to WrestleMania.
No.
Not this year. Maybe he could be the challenger post WrestleMania, and anyone who's listening along may be able to figure out my prediction for the Royal Rumble based on this. But I have a theory, and maybe he could be involved. But there is a few people who seem to be getting long-deserved pushes on SmackDown. Big E is another one who's getting a singles push.
Nakamura, although he wasn't on this week's show, was he?
I don't believe so. No, but there is a few. There is a few that are getting some pushes, so maybe we can see some interesting stuff. But yeah,
we'll go into a bit more during the Rumble anyway. But it's just interesting to see that he's got two big wins clean in a row, and it's nice to see. Where do you want to go? So, now? Want to go on to the Rumble preview?
I would just like to mention to anyone that's listening. Obviously, there are other shows in the wrestling community. AEW and NXT are obviously the two ones you immediately think of. I unfortunately don't watch those and can't really comment too much on them.
No.
So I feel like for this week we will pass over those for the most part. But if anyone is listening to this and would like us to talk about AEW or NXT, we'll leave social media accounts for you to visit at the end, and you'll be able to leave us a message or comment of something you'd like us to talk about. Because I couldn't really talk about anything from this week's shows at all, because it's just not something I've been able to watch. 5 hours of wrestling a week is
one thing I would add with that,
quite a lot as it is. So.
Unless you're on furlough like me and I've got all the time in the world. But yeah, what I would say about that is it's probably the best week ever to not be reviewing either of those shows, because they are probably two of the dullest AEW and NXT shows.
Ooh, that could be a controversial opinion.
So don't I wouldn't worry too much about it. Okay, before we go on to the preview of the Royal Rumble itself, I think we should just have a little chat about the wrestling world in general. What's happened this week? I know we've both heard little bits about the Undertaker's interview with Joe Rogan. He said some controversial things that
I've seen some tweets from
maybe
some WWE superstars that kind of referencing it. So I feel like he may have made things a little bit awkward next time he returns to the locker room with a few of them. It's going to be one of those things with someone from that era is going to say, and just so we'll clarify for anyone who hasn't seen the podcast he was on, he basically implied that he preferred the locker room back in the day, so we're talking 80s, 90s kind of wrestling locker room, because back then men were men. They were. I think he references that some of them had knives and guns on them, and they were tough, real men back then. And nowadays, you go into the locker room, people are worrying that about how pretty they look, and they're playing video games, and it's just a very different environment. And he preferred it back then. And I feel like a bit of the controversy was a bit more than it needed to be with that. Like, he's saying he preferred it back then. That's the kind of people he liked to be around. That's in of itself, I don't think, is offensive. And I did see someone mentioning that complaining about people trying to look pretty is quite rich, coming from a guy that wore eyeliner, which did make me laugh. There was a lot of things he talks about. He also talked on the podcast about, I can't remember exactly what his phrasing was, but just saying that the show was a bit. It was just missing something at the minute. He's not enjoying watching the product, which I feel is a statement a lot of people can understand. There is something that does need to change in WWE. Maybe that would change, but that's not going to likely happen anytime soon. So there is something that does need to change, and it doesn't need a big change. A lot of people saying that, it needs to not be PG, or it needs to go back to like how it was during the Attitude Era. I'm not entirely sure that would actually save anything. watched some old episodes of Raw and SmackDown during the first coronavirus lockdown, and there was some not very fun segments to sit through. And I'm not talking about things that were now a little bit unsavory because of like sexism or racism or anything like that. But there was just some segments of, I wouldn't be praising it in 2021. Like I think a lot of people watched the old shows with rose tinted glasses because outside of kind of the Rock and Stone Cold things, some of the stuff as you work your way down the card is not that much better than. So it's still good, and there's definitely a little of I can't think nostalgia. There's a little nostalgia for the Attitude Era, and I'm not entirely sure that would solve all of WWE's problems in 2021.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think the Attitude Era really has a place now. And what the Undertaker kind of really needs to understand is that things change and people change and times change. So people are different now to what they were in the 1990s. So yeah, people. I mean, I remember reading about a rib where, well, quite a few ribs where it just wasn't very funny. It doesn't seem funny to me. It just seems like bullying. But
the locker room will have changed because people have changed. But you can't really fault him for being like, oh, I liked it back then rather than now, because if you was around that, you would like that.
Yeah, that's fine.
There was some unsavory things, and I don't want to say that it's perfectly fine how things were back then, because it definitely wasn't. But I wouldn't. I didn't immediately like, oh well, that's Undertaker done for. Like, no, he's still going to be remembered as being one of the best character wrestlers and a phenomenal in-ring worker. So,
to me, no, I've never liked the Undertaker, but that's just me. But hey ho, that is what it is. Enough about the Undertaker. Anyway, one thing that I mentioned earlier was that I've been on furlough, and this year I've started reading quite a lot. I've already read Chris Jericho's first book. I've read Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I'd recommend to anyone. And if Matthew McConaughey wants to sponsor us, feel free. I'm giving you free advertising. But I doubt he's listening for some reason. Although there were rumours of him
I thought you were going to say there were rumours of him listening to our podcast. I did see something about Matthew McConaughey in wrestling, but I can't. I think when I saw it, I wasn't in a position to actually like click and read into it. But
no, I don't think there's anything.
I think I was in the queue at Tesco's or something. Like, so
certain wrestling media outlets. Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, I've started reading Chris Jericho's second book, which is Undisputed.
Okay.
And I think it was written around about 2011, 2010, 2011 or something like that. But one particular bit in it towards the beginning of the book that made me chuckle was when he first got to WWE, the move that we now know and love, the Walls of Jericho, was then unnamed. And the office, the writing staff and the office, the back office people sent him a list of names that they thought would suit the Walls of Jericho, or the inverted Boston Grab, or whatever it was called back then.
Okay, let me see if I can guess some first. You did mention something to me earlier, so I have been trying to think of what some other names would be. My first thought when you mentioned it was to an episode of the Stone Cold podcast where he talks about some of his early names that he was given for Stone Cold before they settled on Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they were atrociously bad.
Yeah,
I don't think it was exactly this, but I do believe one of them was like Freezy McFreeze or something to that likeness. So I'm imagining that out of all of them, only the Walls of Jericho was even remotely good.
I mean, there was a couple in there that you kind of look and think, it's okay, it's not too bad. But But I thought what I'd do
Okay.
is I'm going to give you a choice of five, and you tell me which one is the one that
Okay.
was actually suggested out of these. Okay?
Yeah.
So you try and figure out the real one. All right. So if you remember the time, he's just debuted. The Millennium Clock's gone down, so he's kind
I
of got
will
Millennium
admit
Man
on this podcast that
persona
for the longest
character.
time, I didn't get why Chris Jericho's nickname was Y2J. It was far longer than should have been that I realised that it was Y2J instead of Y2K. Now, in my defense, I didn't watch wrestling around that time. I didn't, because of how it was in the UK, being on at really late night. I didn't watch a lot of wrestling until the mid 2000s. So I did miss a lot of that when it happened. But still, I was far older than I should have been before I made the connection between Y2J and Y2K.
I mean, it's an easy mistake to make, especially as in 1999 when you debuted, you would have
depends
been
what time of
six,
year. Depends what time of
7?
year, but yeah, about 6, I think.
Been 6. 6. Okay. All right. Let's get into some of these names anyway. I'm going to give you 5 options. So, and you've got to pick the one that is in this book in front of me. Okay. So the first one is the Millennium Crash. The second one is the Y2 Corkscrew. The third one is the Whamma Jammer. Oh man, some of these make me laugh.
That was the third one.
Was that the third one that I gave you? Yeah, I think it was. The fourth one was the Y2J Catastrophe, and the final one is
they're
the Bender.
all so bad in their own way. The first two, they don't quite make sense because they seem like they were possibly referring to other moves, being a corkscrew and did you say a clash or a crash? So yeah, I hope it's not one of them. The one that made me laugh the most, just because of wrestling, like calling a move the Bender would be quite funny, but I feel like the one that would probably stay funny for longest was number 3, which is it the Yama Jammer or the Whamma Jammer. I'm going to go for that because it's so ridiculous. Okay, but I also really wish that they'd called. They need to call a move the Whamma Jammer.
So you think that's what Vince
I feel
McMahon
they probably suggested
the writing
Bender
team suggested to Jericho.
We all know that Vince McMahon has the sense of humor of 8-year-old, but I'm gonna hopefully say number 3. Number 3 is my answer.
Okay, well, I can confirm that you are right. They did suggest the Whamma Jammer, but they also suggested all of the other 4 names as well. And I've about 5 of the actual ones.
I should have guessed they were all going to be correct. And I did have a thought when you were reading them out, like, wow, Sam has come up with some good fake names for this, and I should have gone with my instinct and thought, oh no, they're all real.
Yeah, so let me just read out a couple of the highlights of these names, because believe it or not, they get worse than that. The Bender being the worst, probably. But there was the Salad Shooter, the Whamma Jammer, which I've said, the Y23, and the Embarrasser. There's also the Twist of Fate, which we know.
Did that predate the Hardys then? I mean, I'm kind of trying to remember my timelines for wrestling, but
it must have done. Yeah. There's also the double leg Vice of Torment, which is quite funny. Imagine that, like JR coming out.
See, that's why I like the Whamma Jammer.
So that was quite funny.
Just JR saying that.
What else have we got here? Killing Time, Power Slave, and of course, a Symbol of Salvation. But anyway, just a little bit of fun. I thought that was quite amusing.
Some interesting names. They're not quite as bad as the Stone Cold original names, but I mean, I suppose they did mention calling it the Bender, which even in 1999, I'm sure would still have been known as a kind of slang term. Yeah,
It would have been offensive to many.
Probably for the best that they didn't call it that. Although I do sometimes wonder whether WWE understands what some of the stuff they say. I believe there was a story from years ago where they had a wrestler call someone a wanker on TV, a British wrestler, because they didn't realise it was offensive, and they just said it and didn't expect it to be offensive. I could be wrong. I do remember hearing that as a story of them just not quite understanding what certain words mean. So maybe they just didn't think anything of it. So,
well, there you go. That's WWE for you. Well, shall we get into the Rumble preview now?
So let's just have a look at the matches available. I feel that predicting the normal matches is going to be a bit more of a challenge, being as so many of them haven't been announced. So for full match predictions, we will upload something to social media before the Royal Rumble.
Yeah. As well as forfeits, because one thing that me and Damien have done over the years is predict pay-per-views, and whoever loses has to do a forfeit. So we'll be uploading that onto social media. But I think it's probably best at the minute if we
predict what we think is going to happen in the Rumble matches. These are the most entertaining matches of the year for me. It's something I look forward to every January. I've booked time off work this year so that I can stay up and watch it. Because unfortunately I'm not on furlough and do have to go into work normally on a Monday. But
furlough's not what it makes up to be. It's very, very
true.
boring.
But when it comes to watching wrestling,
when you can't go out and do anything,
a bonus. But Royal Rumble and WrestleMania are two pay-per-views I always try and watch live. I do feel those are worth the booking the holiday from work to do them. So I am.
And I even remember watching one WrestleMania around my house with you.
I do remember that.
The next day we had to go into school.
That would have been A-level year, I believe.
Yeah, I feel like it was 2010. It would have been 2010.
I think it was A-level because we didn't have a 9. We didn't have to be in at 9.
I kind of remember where
at 11. So we did have a little bit of sleep.
Okay, but either way, I remember sitting in class feeling very, very tired, and I'm pretty sure we might have got the bus home that time instead of walking.
So just while I bring up the list of confirmed wrestlers for the Royal Rumble this year, I was going to ask Sam, what is your favourite Royal Rumble and favourite Royal Rumble moment? We're talking the Royal Rumble matches, not specifically the pay-per-view overall, but like what is the one that stands out to you?
Well, my favourite Royal Rumble match, and probably the highlight, one of the earliest ones that I remember, is Rey Mysterio
2006
winning the Royal Rumble. I think it was around. Yeah, I was going to say 05, 06. I remember that. I remember when I was a kid. I would have in 2006. How old would I have been? 11/12.
I never actually got to watch that Royal Rumble, but I did have the WWE magazine that year that had like the photos and kind of a walk, not a walkthrough, but kind of like a moment by moment description of what happened for that match. So that was how I experienced that one. I have gone back and watched it since, but
yeah, it was just awesome, man. Because around the time it was just after Eddie Guerrero had passed, and it had EG armband on and everything. It was just one of the highlights.
It is a great match,
and like I say, one of the earliest ones that I remember. It was, but one absolute highlight of the Royal Rumble, a bit lighter-hearted, and potentially not strictly Royal Rumble. I think it was the greatest Royal Rumble. Was Titus O'Neil tripping over and sliding under the ring. That's my absolute highlight.
Such a moment.
Oh man, even to this day.
No one who saw that live could hold it together. The commentators laughing was the icing on the cake for that match. You can say what you want about the greatest Royal Rumble. It's probably
Man,
not
it
the
was so
greatest Royal
funny.
Rumble. But yeah, that was such a funny moment. For me, my
It was
favourite
so
Royal
funny.
Rumble
How about
is because as much as they are enjoyable to watch at the time, sometimes I feel that they don't stick that well in my memory. So, but for me, it's not when I watch live; it's when I actually had to go back and watch. But I did actually I wanted to watch a couple of the Royal Rumbles just before we did this podcast, and this was one of them I chose to rewatch. It's the 2005 Royal Rumble with Batista and John Cena as the last two. It was around the time I was into watching wrestling. I used to watch it with my dad at the weekends, and it was either it wasn't Raw and SmackDown. Like we watched the extra shows. I can't remember what they were called. There were Heat and Velocity, but there was two other ones. I can't remember what they were called. Now it's quite annoying, but we used to watch those at weekends. They were like highlight shows. If anyone hasn't watched them, well, they got combined into Experience. They used to be separate, one for each show. One of them was WWE Bottom Line, and I can't remember what the SmackDown one was called, or maybe that was a SmackDown one. It's not really important to the story, but that was the time I was watching it, and I was a big fan of both John Cena and Batista. Their storylines going into the Royal Rumble, coming out of them, were some fond memories of watching wrestling. But that Royal Rumble, mainly just for the ending, was such a highlight to watch. It's such a good match where you're not even really sure who's going to win, unless, of course, obviously you know. And it also then has one of the most infamous Royal Rumble moments in it, which is them both eliminating each other at the same time. Something that they couldn't have planned it to be any better, and they didn't plan it for that to happen. And it's such a ridiculous moment that I'm so glad happened, because and it does also have the somewhat
that's what makes you remember that
unfortunate but quite funny moment of Vince McMahon storming to the ring and somehow blowing both of his quads as he gets into the ring. Or I think he does one, tries to stand up, and then does the other, and he just sits in the ring, legs out, just angrily shouting. And I mean, he's okay. He recovered from it, so we can kind of laugh at it without it being in bad taste. But it just looks so ridiculous, because you've got John Cena, who's 6 foot, Batista, I think he's like 6'4", stood there looking confused. You've got the refs not knowing what to do, and you've just got a really angry Vince McMahon sat yelling. And what a visual that is!
It was amazing. It was amazing. If we're talking about quality Royal Rumbles, I think I don't know. It might surprise some people, but looking a bit closer to home, if you want, last year's Royal Rumble, I thought was actually awesome. It was really, really good, with the whole Lesnar starting it and who's going to eliminate him. Is he going to eliminate it all? Everyone, and then obviously Edge's return, which I don't think anyone saw coming. Not even Kevin Dunn with his camera work, because he unforgivably
we heard
managed to miss the spear.
I remember before when we was doing predictions before, we'd heard rumors about a return for Edge, but it still just seemed like just one of those things where someone says it.
It's one of those ones you hear. Edge is going to return. Or
There has been a few of those this year.
All right. Whatever.
You're saying about Brock Lesnar. I feel that is one of the things that has been great about not splitting the Royal Rumble, but having 2 Royal Rumbles. Not only is there now so much more Royal Rumble to enjoy each year, but they can do something like that, because if it was the only Royal Rumble match, I feel that Lesnar segment would have worn thin much quicker, because you missed out on a lot of the normal stuff you get in a Royal Rumble because it was just Lesnar eliminating person after person. But because it was the second Royal Rumble of the night, you'd already had all those other moments, so you got to do something different, and it definitely a highlight since not separating, but since adding the Women's Royal Rumble in 2018, that they've been able to do those kind of moments without wasting a Royal Rumble. So, because there's been times before, we had it in 2016 with Roman Reigns defending the WWE title in the Royal Rumble. They just kind of took something away from the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, definitely.
But
it wasn't
now that we have two, they can take these kind of gambles on doing something a bit different, and it doesn't really affect it. And I'm hoping they do something like that this year, because they've got the whole. I believe it's still going to be Thunderdome. I don't know if they've got live crowds. I've heard some rumblings, about live crowds, but I'm hoping they are able to do something with it, and just kind of use a little bit of the camera work they've been able to do in the Thunderdome with the Royal Rumble, just to make it a little bit interesting. I really hope we do see some stuff like that, because that is a nice little bit of entertainment that we don't normally get.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that moves us nicely onto this year's Royal Rumble. Before we go into sort of winners and what we think is going to happen, do you think there's going to be any surprise entrants where they were sat in the back and Roman, I think he was sort of telling Heyman to deal with his business, blah, 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 but he was basically having a go at him. And you sort of saw Paul Heyman's face drop, in a sense that he wasn't happy in a way. And you could kind of see a story between Brock and Roman leading up to Mania, with Brock as a face, and then at Mania, Heyman turning on Roman and realigning with Brock. But I don't know. But there's some logic in Brock winning.
Okay, so I have different winners. My left field pick and my kind of favourite to win are both different. I do have an idea for matches for Big E and Lesnar at WrestleMania. Unfortunately, they are against each other.
Okay, interesting.
I feel like Big E's getting a push. We mentioned it earlier, but I don't feel like he's getting the WrestleMania match against Roman this year.
Okay.
So my idea would be for them to face each other, because it kind of ties into the whole Kofi Kingston, Brock Lesnar thing from before. So that's where I think those would go. But obviously that's not a prediction for today. Let's hope that comes true. I think that would be a good one. My winner I've got is Shinsuke Nakamura.
Okay, that's very interesting. He won it a couple of years ago, of course.
He did. I'm picking him because he had that win against the Gauntlet. Only, I mean, let's say he won. He did win the Gauntlet only for Roman to cost him it. I feel like that builds the story.
Yeah.
Now he wasn't on SmackDown this week, which is interesting to me, because I feel like they would have wanted to keep him on, but maybe they're doing it as like, you're not thinking about it. He's going to come out, he's going to be like 29 or something, and he's going to win the Rumble, and he's going to face.
So he's at the back of your mind.
Yeah, and we mentioned about Cesaro getting a push. I think if they do push him, he will feud with Nakamura.
So he'll be the post Mania Rumble. Post-Mania rivalry.
Yes, that's what I think. That's what I would do if I was booking my story. Nakamura wins. Maybe they have a blow-off match, whatever the pay-per-view immediately after WrestleMania is, and then you throw in Cesaro into that. And I feel like that could be a good story. Maybe not necessarily straight away. Maybe you build to that for like a SummerSlam one, but I feel like that's one of the big feuds afterwards. I feel that would be good, and a lot of people would like to see that.
Yeah.
Out of left field is difficult because I can't think of anyone that's really unlikely. Well, not really unlikely, but one that would be quite surprising. I've got up the list of everyone that's confirmed, and the only one that's on there, I'm like, yeah, that wouldn't happen, is Jey Uso, because that wouldn't really make much sense. I don't see that happening either. So an out of left field one is a bit more difficult. I don't think it's going to happen, but just because I need to say something, I'm going to pick.
Go on.
Yeah, I'm not hesitating I'm hesitating because I'm trying to think. I was hoping just by saying that I would like trigger some idea and just a name would come out of.
I mean, Shinsuke Nakamura is pretty left field in itself.
I don't think it is because they've already started that story.
It is, yeah, but we're in the last 2 weeks. I suppose that's what they did with Drew last year. Okay, so there's some interesting picks for the men's rumble. Moving on to the women's rumble, I'll start again with who I think and want to win.
What about surprises first?
Oh yeah, surprises for the women's one. Well, I found it a bit harder for the women's one, to be honest. I suppose you could say maybe Lita, Trish, and people like that might come back. But they did that. Was it last year or the year before? So again, I think it most likely it would probably be some NXT guys coming up. Maybe a Candice LeRae. She's been really good in NXT. An NXT person is actually who I've got as the winner.
Okay.
So I've got Rhea Ripley to win the Rumble. And I think between the Rumble and Mania, potentially at the Elimination Chamber, Charlotte Flair wins the Raw Women's title.
Okay.
And Rhea Ripley goes on to win the belt at WrestleMania. And again,
it's a flip from last year.
Exactly. I have a feeling they're going to do it. Do you remember last year they had that vignette with Rhea Ripley at, is it Raymond James Stadium where they've got Mania, and they went to have it last year, and she was like, oh, I've worked all my life to get here. And then pretty much the next week, pandemic happens, you're in an empty performance center, you lose your belt to Charlotte. But I have a feeling they might do that, and she's going to go, oh, it's been the worst year of my career, but I've been grinding, and I've got to the Rumble now, and I'm going to win the title at Mania. And that's where I think they're going to go. Okay,
that would be good. So I wouldn't be opposed to seeing that. Do you have a left field? I mean, I feel that is quite a left field, but...
Yeah, I think I've actually done these in the wrong order, actually, because I've put left field and I couldn't think of anyone left field at all. But the only one that I could think of was Bianca Belair winning.
So I would consider that like a more obvious winner.
Yeah. I've put them the wrong way around. But anyway, Bianca Belair. I think she's getting a push on SmackDown, isn't she, with the whole Bayley stuff? And I could see a good program between her and a heel Sasha.
Yeah. Okay.
But I couldn't think of anyone else, to be honest. So who you got?
So I would have gone for Bianca Belair as a winner, but in the spirit of picking different people for the predictions, just make it a bit more interesting, I will pick someone else. I did have a couple of other names in mind. I won't tell you my surprise yet, because my surprise is also my left field pick. So my winner, I will pick. I'm going to go with Alexa Bliss.
Okay. You could see it happening
as a winner, because she's had that bit with Asuka on Raw. That could be like the setup for a feud. Maybe they won't because they've just had a match, but I can't think of anyone. Like I feel like Bianca Belair is going to win, so
I think she's the obvious one.
Yeah, so I'll go for Alexa Bliss. I feel like you may get the point on that prediction if they go for like an obvious one, but if they go for an out of left field one, something that no one's really expecting, then my surprise return to win it is Ronda Rousey.
See, I was going to put her in there, but I thought, why would she come back in the crowdless era of WWE?
Because WrestleMania isn't going to be crowdless. They are going to do fans at WrestleMania. It's been have been 2 years since he left.
2 years, yeah.
At WrestleMania, that is. And long-term booking, which I know WWE never do.
This is sounding optimistic already, at best.
But there is a follow-up story. If she returns and wins, she becomes champion again. Doesn't matter who she beats, really, for it to work. I feel like she would probably go SmackDown over Raw.
Okay.
And SummerSlam or next WrestleMania or some point, I don't know whether she keeps the title till then or just gets it back on them. But there is a follow-up feud that will eventually be suitable, which is Becky Lynch. At some point, she's probably going to return. It won't be for a while yet. We're probably not talking even next WrestleMania. But I just have this suspicion in my head that at some point they're going to want to do the rematch between the two of them.
Oh, they'll definitely want to. And I think on the initial match at WrestleMania the other year, they missed the chance by not just making it a singles match between them.
Now, I don't know how long it takes to go from having a baby to being WrestleMania ready. I don't know. I can't
me
think,
either, to be honest.
I can't think of any wrestler who has had a kid, any female wrestler who's had a kid and then returned. Nothing's springing to mind.
Especially at the times we're in at the minute. Would you want to leave your kid to go and work in wrestling during a pandemic?
That is true. I don't know whether that is even possible, but from a booking point of view, Rousey returns, beats Sasha Banks at WrestleMania. She's on SmackDown. Becky Lynch comes back to challenge her. She goes to SmackDown because Seth's on SmackDown. We'll keep them together. Like, it works as a story. Now, whether it's at all possible, I don't know. It's
interesting. It'll be good if it happened, but I suppose that's why it's a left field one.
That's why it's left field. Like, I'm fantasy booking a little bit, but maybe it will happen. Probably won't, but.
Okay. Before we wrap, do you think we're going to be seeing any surprising moments in the Rumble, like Casey Katsunari did the other year, or Kofi's spots?
Bianca Belair.
Is there anything else that they can do?
I think Bianca Belair is going to do something. Bailey's going to eliminate her, but she's going to jump onto the barrier, jump back in, and then eliminate Bailey. Something like that.
Okay.
If it's on the way to win, great. If not, hopefully Alexa does, and then I get the point. We will predict the other matches. There's only two, which are the men's championship matches at the moment. I feel we're both thinking that they're going to retain.
Or at least hoping.
At least hoping. So we will post full predictions for all the other matches onto our social media in the coming week. If you aren't following us on one of those, I'm not sure how you found out about this podcast, but you can follow us on Twitter at Figure Foucast, and we're also on Facebook. You can find us just by searching the Figure Foucast. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close, Sam?
No, I think we're about there, mate. To be honest, I think we've pretty comprehensively done that.
Yeah. Oh, hopefully it was as enjoyable to listen to as it was to record, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon.
We'll see.
Sorted. There we go.